Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Someone asked if I could make a Green Arrow costume video. I'm going to give it a try. Although I won't be able to make as many costumes as I did before, you're going to understand why well enough. Although if you guys want to see a whole bunch of generic Green Arrow suit that I can come up with using a whole bunch of elite special ops suits or stuff like that, or using a whole bunch of Amazon type of armors. Like I can create literally dozens of Green Arrow, like generic looking Green Arrow, using a whole bunch of pieces of armor, like Amazon armor, or using a whole bunch of paramilitary gear. So you let me know, and I can make a follow-up video with a whole bunch of those. But today we're going to take a look at various Green Arrow styles that I can recreate that actually comes from either from the comics or from the TV show. Here we're looking at pretty much as close to the Green Arrow, the longbow hunter, as I was able to get. Basically, I wasn't able to reproduce the classic Green Arrow set of gear. Green Arrow had this little hat originally when he started, and he had a pretty much generic looking superhero costume. His one shtick that no one else had, or no one else really had, was the bow and arrow stuff. And then later down the line, Neil Adams redesigned the character in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And again, he kept the little hat, but there's not really a way to be able to recreate. There's no hat to recreate the little hat that Green Arrow used to have. And for the Neil Adams gear, that was pretty much the classic look for Green Arrow through most of the 70s and a good chunk of the 80s. There's not really any style that allows us to recreate that style. So I decided to go straight with the Green Arrow, the Longbow Hunter era costume, which kind of looked like this. It should probably be a more loose fitting. It wasn't quite as skin tight as it is here, but sadly within the limitations of DC Universe Online, sometimes it's as close as we can get. So basically, with the Green Arrow, the Longbow Hunter, they tried to go back into a mode where Green Arrow was more of an urban vigilante, and I guess they were trying to follow up on the in the 70s. Green Arrow was dealing a lot with social issues at the time, and they tried to keep that through the 80s with our friend the Longbow Hunter. And with the Longbow Hunter, they decided to get rid of all the quote-unquote silly stuff, like the boxing glove arrows and all that good stuff. They decided to go with, he was just using some good old hunting arrows, and he was literally hunting the bad guys. So within the context of DC Universe Online, this is pretty darn close to the look of the character. Obviously, it shouldn't be this skin tight, and there should be a strap that passes through the chest piece. Basically, the strap that holds the quiver. There should be like this red strap that kind of hooks up to the belt and holds the quiver in place. Sadly, it's not really an option with the styles I have. At character creation, you can recreate a pretty darn good version of our friend Green Arrow. At character creation, you cannot have, like, this is the Archer quiver, but you do have a quiver that you can use straight at character creation. For the gloves, these are the aeronaut gloves, I think. There's a whole bunch of gloves that you can get at character creation. So most of what you see, you can pretty much, aw, poor Crypto. You want some attention. So at character creation, you can recreate something somewhat close to the spirit of Green Arrow. If you were to create, let's say, this character and call him the Green Quiver or the Green whatever, people would understand, or the Emerald Arrow. People would understand that this is supposed to be Green Arrow. I'm using the Green Arrow emblem. I'm going to show you a Green Arrow set of gear in just a bit. But ironically enough, the Green Arrow set of gear cannot support an emblem. So if you want to have the quote-unquote official Green Arrow emblem, you have to use something other than the Green Arrow gear. For the Green Arrow emblem, you have no choice. You have to buy it on the broker. I know people don't like it when I say that, but this emblem comes from the Team Up Time capsules. And the odds of if you could purchase the Team Up Time capsules from the broker and hope to get the Green Arrow emblem, but if you want really specifically the Green Arrow emblem, instead of buying the time capsules on the broker, opening those time capsules and hoping to get lucky and to get the emblem you want, just purchase the emblem you want straight from the broker. It's so much more convenient. I mentioned the Neil Adams Green Arrow. Basically, Green Arrow had like those gloves that had some straps and that showed the skin of the arm a bit. Sadly, we don't really have any such gloves. This here is the T Slimline, and the sort of straps that you have on the arms and even on the legs. That's as close to the classic Neil Adams as you can get. Obviously, we don't see the skin of the character, and there's not enough quote-unquote straps. But it's if you're trying to recreate a somewhat classic Green Arrow looking character, this is a good compromise, I suppose. I guess I could have gone with the new Genesis pants and the nuclear boots to try to be a bit closer to the classic look of the character. But again, it doesn't really look like the classic Green Arrow that Neil Adams designed. It kind of evokes the feeling of the character, but doesn't really look like it. So I went with the in the previous version I went with the combat slimline pants, which kind of matches with the chest piece. But then at some point, DC Universe Online decided to give us an official set of Green Arrow gear. This is the Green Arrow gear from season 4 of the TV show, if I'm not mistaken. So now, if you want to create a 100% accurate Green Arrow character, you actually can. You have a perfect set of gear in order to be able to do so. If you're wondering where can you get this suit of gear, again, it's a suit of gear that came from the Team Up Time capsules. If you just want the Green Arrow gear, don't purchase time capsules. Just buy the Green Arrow set of gear from the broker. If you really want to purchase time capsules, go ahead. But once you end up to needing just only 1 or 2 pieces to complete the set, don't keep on opening and opening and opening time capsules. Once you reach the point where you have most of the gear and you only need a very specific piece of gear, just buy it from a broker. And what's even better than getting an official Green Arrow set of gear, it's to get an enhanced version of that set of gear. Yes, it will require you to play the broker a bit in order to be able to craft this enhanced version of the set of gear. But if you ask me, it's worth it. The set of gear looks all kinds of awesome. I love using it. And I've used it for quite a few other characters, like the shoulders and the pants and the belt. I've used it, and even the boots. I've used it with way too many characters at some point. It was a bit crazy. But they did a really good job, I thought, making an enhanced version of this set of gear. And they have some nice highlight. They have some nice shiny bits just at the right place. So this looks all kinds of awesome in my book. So when we got this set of gear, I was a really happy puppy. I can tell you, I made the happy dance quite a bit when we got this set of gear. And since we looked at the costume from season 4 of our friend Green Arrow, when the character started, when the TV show started, the TV show basically was only called Arrow. And early on, the character wasn't even called Arrow; he was called like the Hood. He went through quite a few weird generic names like that. Like I understand the producers were a little embarrassed to have a character called Green Arrow, so they tried to call it anything but. So they went through a whole bunch of names like the Hood, the Vigilante. Then at some point it became called the Arrow. Until finally, after like 3 or 4 seasons, they finally decided to go all in and to finally call it Green Arrow, as they probably should have from the beginning. Although you could tell that early on they were a bit embarrassed to be making a show about a silly superhero costume, about a silly superhero character. There's even this one scene in episode 1 or 2, I think, where they're sitting around the table wondering, what should we call this evil vigilante who's doing some justice in our town? And at some point someone mentioned Green Arrow as a name. And the first thing Oliver Queen says right away is, that name is stupid. which probably which was quite telling at the time. You could tell that they were trying to do a superhero TV show, but they were very embarrassed to be doing a superhero TV show, so they were trying to make it anything but a superhero TV show. But finally, once we had the Flash TV show that was a lot more successful than Arrow, then they decided to go all in with the superhero stuff, which led to some good stuff and some bad stuff. I guess depending on if you like. If you were a big fan of Green Arrow of Arrow in season one, you may have been disappointed by a lot of the changes they made. Although with season 6 they went a little bit crazy, but that's another debate. So this is as close to the Green Arrow season 1 costume as I was able to get. Obviously early on they were embarrassed to be making a TV show with a silly superhero, so they tried to get away with, instead of using a silly mask, he had like some grease paint over his face, and that's how he was sort of hiding his identity. That and the way they were lighting the scene, usually you could tell it was him, but you couldn't really tell. So they tried to make it so that in the dark with his hood and with the sort of grease painted over his face, people couldn't tell who he was. Until a few seasons later, they finally decided to go all in and to finally give him the classic Green Arrow mask that he's still using today in the TV show. Pretty much everything you see here can be obtained at character creation. The exception is probably the gloves. The gloves, I'm using the Lethal Zealot gloves because in season 1, I think he still has that even later on, but he had those sort of little projectile to his wrist that he could throw, which kind of sort of can be faked with the Lethal Zealot gloves here. Obviously, he didn't have that humongous shield here, but what can you do? Within the context of DC Universe Online, this is pretty darn close to our season 1 Arrow friend as we can get. And of course, at some point, we got the new 52. And I guess I could blame the new 52 for pretty much messing up the character, but they were, for quite a while, you could tell that they didn't really know what to do with that character. At some point, they tried to go back to the Green Arrow of the Silver Age. Well, basically, for a while, Green Arrow was dead and was replaced with his son, Connor Hawke, which we'll look at in just a minute. But then at some point, they tried to bring him back, but they tried to bring him back as sort of the Silver Age Green Arrow, and that lasted for a bit until people ran out of idea on what to do with that character. And then they tried to go back, around the time of Brightest Day, they tried to go back to the Longbow Hunter version of the character. And that didn't last very long. Basically, we got the new 52 not long after that. And with the new 52, they tried to pretty much reinvent the whole DC universe. And for Green Arrow, they tried to make something that was new, but that also was kind of sort of like the TV show. Again, it's as if they didn't really know what to do. They wanted to copy the TV show, but without copying the TV show, if it makes any sense. And they ended up with a bit of a mess of a character. And they've been changing the character every, I don't know, 6 months ever since the new 52. I guess the latest big change we had was with Rebirth. With Rebirth, they tried to go a bit. They tried to go back a bit towards the more classic Green Arrow or the more Longbow Hunter classic Green Arrow, if it makes any sense. But with a mixture of the TV show Green Arrow, like the costume was almost like the season 4 costume of our friend Green Arrow from the TV show. So you can tell that they seem to be a little lost with when it comes to the character. They don't quite know what to do with it, and they don't quite know if they should go back to the classic version from the comics, if they should go with with a version that looks like the TV show version, if they should go with another entirely different version. So sadly, they seem to be a bit lost when it comes to our friend Green Arrow. And this doesn't exactly look like the new 52, but again, within the context of DC Universe Online, this is about as close to the new 52 version as I was able to get. Technically, he should be having a hood, but I barely saw him. Like in most of the research I did to look for that costume, I almost never saw him use the hood. He always has the hood pulled down. I guess if you're using armories, you could give him an armory without the hood and an armory with the hood. And you'll notice I pretty much used the classic hood throughout the whole video. There's a handful of hoods that could have been used, but uh, I go with the classic hood. The classic hood works well enough. The other hoods can still work, but some of them look a bit weird to me. So I stick to using the classic hood because that's pretty much the one I prefer. And as I mentioned at some point, they didn't seem to know what to do with the character anymore. So they did what they often do when they run out of ideas. They killed the character and they replaced him with a new Green Arrow. In this case, it was Connor Hawke, which was supposed to be his son. I forget what the backstory was for behind that. And he had one of the probably worst design costume ever. I have no idea why they were trying to. I guess they were trying to make it sort of quote unquote realist by adding some brown to the costume or something. But he was fighting crime within an urban city. Like he wasn't fighting crime in the woods. He was fighting crime in the city. So I guess whether it was green or brown, it didn't really matter. And again, the costume did have a hood, but somehow they never really seemed to use it. So once more, if you really wanted to, and if you're using multiple armories, I guess you could have an armory without the hood and an armory with the hood, assuming that you would want to use this costume. So that's pretty much it for our friend Green Arrow. So again, there isn't that many costumes that can be made to be faithful to either the comics or the TV show. But there's a whole bunch of different costumes that could be made with some military gear or some Amazonian gear. Again, if you want to see such a video, I could easily come up with a whole bunch of new costumes using a whole bunch of different pieces of gear that aren't really Green Arrow pieces of gear, but that could recreate a darn looking Green Arrow. You guys let me know if you want to see a follow-up video about that. So again, our friend Green Arrow had a few periods of stability. Like there was pretty much the golden age Green Arrow that lasted for quite a bit. Then there was the silver age Green Arrow by Neil Adams that lasted throughout the 70s and mostly throughout the 80s. And then the next period was pretty much Green Arrow the Longbow Hunter, which lasted from like 1986, 87 up to the early 90s. But sadly, in the early mid 90s, they finally decided to do what they often do: kill our friend Green Arrow and replace him with Connor Hawke. Holy crap, that was quite a jump. Connor Hawke lasted for quite a bit until finally they did what was to be expected. They brought back Green Arrow from the dead, and they tried to bring him back as the Silver Age Green Arrow for a bit. Obviously, that lasted for a bit, but until they finally ran out of ideas and decided to try to go back to the Longbow Hunter with Brightest Day. That lasted a little bit until we got the new 52, and since the new 52, they kept on changing and changing Green Arrow because they don't seem to be able to find a formula that actually kind of works, or they don't seem to have really any idea of what to do with the character. At some point, they tried to make it somewhat like the TV show, then they tried to go back to the Silver Age. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing with the character, but obviously they seem to have a bit of trouble to find to figure out what to do with the character, at least since the new 52. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.